where best friends and next-door neighbors, Willow and Lillian, spill the tea on murder, mysteries, and other things that go bump in the night. So get your favorite teacup ready, and let's get into it. Welcome to Cruelty Podcast. This is Lillian, and with me is Willow.
Hello.
And it's Cult Month.
It is.
Y'all. I don't like winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love winter, but it's about to get real cold.
It's about to get like -9.
Like there are like safety houses popping up all over town, and
thank God.
Yeah,
I'm glad our town is coming together.
Yeah. It's really beautiful, but it's just also kind of like nerve-wracking, I guess.
I'm just like, please do not go out, electricity.
How cold is it gonna be?
Fucking cold. But anyway, that's just my bitching is done, and now we can get to the case.
Yeah.
Or cult, rather.
The cult. So today's cult is it's the case of the Mormon Manson of Mexico.
That's a lot of M's.
Yeah.
Some alliteration there.
So this is Evril LeBaron, the cult leader of the Church of the Firstborn of the Lamb of God cult.
Well, that's a mouthful.
You see why I call it Mormon Manson.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to say.
So trigger warnings for this case are sexual assault. I don't know if polygamy is something that could be triggering, but it could be. Brainwashing, mental illness, religious trauma, and of course, murder. So Evril LeBaron was one of the most dangerous cult leaders in history, called Mormon Manson for his uncanny ability to convince other people to kill. So we're all pretty much familiar with the LDS Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. Most of the time, if you hear the word Mormon, you're going to associate it with polygamy or Salt Lake City, Utah. Shout out to everybody I know from there, because I know
we know so many people in Utah.
I've spent some good times in Salt Lake City. I really love that weird ass town. But their prophet, if you're not familiar with Mormonism, their prophet Joseph Smith had apparently been visited by an angel who told him where to find these golden tablets that were buried somewhere in the desert, which would later become the Book of Mormon. He would later add tablets of his own doctrine on plural marriages and blood atonement. He believed that it was part of God's plan to repopulate the world for men to have many wives to produce as many children as possible, and that those who had sinned unforgivably against God to shed their blood and atone for their sins. So he was pro-murder all the way. And it was considered a privilege and an honor to help these people pass over. So it was a privilege and an honor not just to die to atone for your sins, but it was also a privilege and honor to kill your fellow brethren. Like, this was an act of love and service. So they were taught. And basically they needed to have the act of like spilling the blood. He didn't like hanging or like strangulation. He specifically wanted bloodshed in order to pay for your sins. And yeah, Joseph Smith is quoted as saying, quote, "I am opposed to hanging. Even if a man kill another, I will shoot him or cut off his head, spill his blood on the ground, let the smoke thereof ascend up to God. And if I ever have the privilege of making a law on that subject, I will have it so."
Well, I'm glad he didn't get to do any of that.
Which is ironic because he died from bloodshed. Like, long story short, he had ordered the destruction of this one-time newspaper that had an article that was written about him that he didn't like. While he was on trial, he was killed by an angry mob of up to 200 men. They were all painted with gunpowder. They'd stormed the jail that he was being held in. They pulled him and his brother out. They shot him in the chest and then shot him in the head. And after he was shot in the chest, before he was shot in the head, his last words were, "I am a dead man," before he was being executed. Now, since he was running for U.S. president at the time, he was considered the first presidential candidate to be assassinated and thus considered a martyr to the LDS Church. So his death was kind of like a multi-edged sword, if that makes sense. Like, not only was, he kind of, renowned as, being assassinated, he was also a martyr, but also he had his blood shed. Like, that was blood atonement. I'm not going to get into all of the terrible things this man did in his life, but he sexually assaulted many young girls. Like, it's kind of ridiculous the amount of things that he got away with. So I just find it ironic that his blood was shed.
Good.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So after Joseph Smith was killed, Brigham Young was appointed the next head of the LDS Church, and he was quoted as saying, "I will tell you how much I love those characters. If they had any respect their own welfare, they would come forth and say whether Joseph Smith was a prophet or not, we shed his blood, and now let us atone for it. And they would be willing to have their heads chopped off, that their blood might run upon the ground, and the smoke of it rise before the Lord as an incense for their sins."
Calm down.
Like, holy shit.
Touch grass.
Holy shit, dude.
This is why I don't fuck with religion. That is too intense for my ass.
Right?
I am too chill.
Right? So he goes further to say, "Will you love your brothers and sisters likewise, when they have committed a sin that cannot be atoned for without the shedding of their blood? Will you love that man or woman well enough to shed their blood? That is what Jesus meant. Suppose you found your brother in bed with your wife and put a javelin through both of them. You would be justified, and they would atone for their sins, and then be received into the kingdom of God. I would at once do so in such a case. And under the circumstances, I have no wife whom I love so well that I would not put a javelin through her heart, and would do it with clean hands. There is not a man or woman who violates the covenants made with their God that will not be required to pay the debt. The blood of Christ will never wipe that out. Our blood must atone for it."
I'm not like a biblical theologian or an expert or anything. But I think that he got that wrong fundamentally.
There's a mistranslation there.
Jesus said that
this guy is bloodthirsty.
Yeah, calm down,
And
Dracula.
this is just one of their prophets.
Yeah, calm down, Dracula. Jesus is supposed to have died for everybody's sins. That includes you getting cucked, bitch. Just saying. Ooh, I gotta calm down.
So the majority of the LDS Church began to retract from the blood atonement and the plural marriage aspects of the religion in the late 1800s, right around the time the U.S. government had banned polygamy. The church splintered, leaving the majority of the congregation embarrassed of the polygamy past, and then all of these fundamentalist families kind of splintered out from that. And those splintered families are all the ones that wanted to continue the teachings of Joseph Smith and the plural marriages and the blood atonement.
Just like in my favorite show, Sister Wives.
Yeah. I thought about that because, throughout it, I, kept referencing Sister Wives or, kept hearing it. And I was just like, aw, Lillian loves her some Sister Wives.
True story. I don't. I hate it, but Maris loves it, and I watch it with him. So.
Right. So when polygamy was banned in the United States, those that wanted to follow the teachings of Joseph Smith would move out of the United States and seek refuge in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. That's where they started a colony called Colonia Juarez, which later grew pretty much into a city. Now, Mitt Romney's father's family was one of those families that left to go to Mexico, and so was the LeBaron family.
Mitt. That shouldn't be a name for not even a dog. I'll leave it alone.
I know, I had to ignore all in the spelling on this.
Mitt.
Isn't it short for Mitchell?
Don't know.
It's short for baseball mitt. I'm sorry. Mitten.
That's a really good joke, Willow.
Mitten Romney.
Yes, Mittens. Mittens. That's his name.
God. Oh, he's awful. So actually, Vice did a documentary coverage on this where they actually went to Chihuahua to shoot this documentary of the Mormon Manson. They didn't actually really go into detail about the LeBaron family and I mean, very much. They just kind of made mention of it. But in this documentary, it's worth watching because you get kind of like a first-hand perspective of what it's like there now, today.
That sounds interesting. I'll give it a look-see.
It is just all cartel activity, and like especially with them having cameras and news crew and like, you know, very clearly American people, they were targets the entire, like they had to like switch hotel rooms in the middle of the night a few times because they had vehicles following them. And yeah, it was pretty intense. It was kind of a scary situation for them to be in, but definitely worth watching. They do an interview with Mitt Romney's brother as well as members of the LeBaron family who still run those colonies today. So they're still up and running today.
Oh, good.
So yeah, this case involves not only cults, murder, a hit list, mental illness, and brainwashing that always goes involved with cults, but it also involves drug cartels and weapons trades and the underground unspoken war between two very different groups of outlaws and the Mexican and U.S. governments. This is just a really big mess. It really is. And it's a huge piece of history that like kind of got swept up under the rug, because these are a lot of people that died. And these colonies, like I said, are still going on today. We don't know if people still abide by the blood atonement. I doubt they'll talk about it today, but yeah. So the Mormons that moved to Mexico believed that they were following God's will to leave Babylon, which was the United States, and go to the Promised Land. Evril LeBaron was the first child of Maud Lucinda LeBaron and Alma Dayer LeBaron, born in the Mexican Mormon colony. Known mostly for his middle name, his father, Dayer LeBaron, is on record to have fathered over 20 children through plural marriage. Dayer's father, Ervil's grandfather, Benjamin Franklin LeBaron, was a confidential secretary and part-time business partner for the Joseph Smith. So the LeBaron family were pretty close and interconnected with not only Joseph Smith, but the LDS Church. They were one of the original families, quote unquote, chosen by God to leave Babylon and set up a settlement in Mexico, believing that once the settlement was formed, Babylon, or the United States, would be destroyed by God for not upholding the sacred word and messages from God through Joseph Smith. So they basically thought that like their job was to repopulate the world because God was going to destroy all the people that weren't Mormon, essentially. So that's one of the reasons why they were having so many children. And yeah, Joseph Smith had upwards of 50 wives. 50.
That's too many
50.
wives.
So the move to Mexico was basically an honor for devout fundamentalists. They were the chosen ones. Like in most cults, the families feared the outside world, keeping to themselves, knowing that their way of life was illegal, but also believing that they were doing the will of the Lord and essentially being religiously persecuted. Plus, their families were growing so big and so fast, it was like they were all, like, each household was like a small community. Basically how Salt Lake City was started, just a few families growing very, very big, very, very rapidly. So were these colonies in Mexico. They kept their children homeschooled and basically had, you know, a whole school's worth of children within the home. And they believed that because they had so many children varying from different ages and different age groups, they believed that their children were socialized enough, and they believed that their children should only be socialized amongst each other. I mean, clearly to keep like the cult's doctrine safe within the children, but yeah, to really keep them away from outside influences. The brainwashing always came from the male leaders within the family, and the LeBaron clan was no different. The men within the family had a long history of quote unquote supernatural powers.
Okay.
or gifts from God.
Sure.
Whether it be seeing ghosts or angels or hearing God or the prophets speak to them, the men in the LeBaron family were kind of on the same level of Joseph Smith as far as what they deemed godliness.
This kind of reminds me of Warren Jeffs, but with more murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know too much about him, but I have just, peeked at some
Not any
headlines.
good.
Yeah. So now we all know that a lot of religions, most in fact, claim to experience hearing the voices of God, right? Like pretty much any religion you can think of, there are stories of people hearing the voice of God or hearing the voices of angels or, just non-religious people hearing the voices of their past relatives. That's not unheard of, and that doesn't necessarily mean mental illness. But I feel like this goes a lot deeper than that. A lot of people consider this to be religious delusions, induced schizophrenia, or some sort of shared psychosis. Dare LeBaron heard voices his whole entire life, whether it be in dreams or within his own mind. He interpreted as visitors and either visitors or outside forces or God himself. He said that the voices came from deep within his chest, a place he called monitor, which gives me the there's another word for it, but the alternate personalities, the different I forgot what it's called.
The ID?
The altars.
Yeah.
Okay. Altars. It kind of feels like that whenever you give it the name the Monitor, but they of course did not seek any type of medical help, especially for their mental illnesses, so we don't know. He was never diagnosed. But yeah, he showed many symptoms, and so did his children. Now, schizophrenia can be hereditary, but it is not always hereditary. People with one schizophrenic parent have 1 in a 10 chance of developing the disease. People with both parents contributing have a 50% chance of developing, whereas people with neither parents are affected 1 in 100% chance. So there are a lot of people that believe that not just Dyer had schizophrenia, but also his father and many of the children. It is also believed that Maud's father might have had schizophrenia, so it could be something that the children could have been affected by. This is all could have, might have been, because nobody was ever diagnosed, but that's just going off of what was experienced by other family members and what was assumed by other family members. Either way, it could be, outside influences with religious indoctrination, with the encouragement of religious delusions. I know that I have been in a lot of situations growing up in the church where I was forced to try to speak in tongues and forced to, speak to angels and things like that. Really scary shit.
That really, as someone raised completely secular, that shit always freaks me out.
I was cornered in a bathroom stall by a pastor and a sister and tried to be forced to speak in tongues. And I couldn't do it, clearly. But religious trauma is a real thing. It is a real thing. Religious psychosis is a real thing. I don't want to undermine any of these possible things that they could be experiencing, but I also don't want to write it off as a definite that they were, because we just don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, Joseph Smith heard the voices, Dyer heard the voices, and a lot of the children heard the voices as well. In fact, Dyer claimed to have been visited by his father, the assistant to Joseph Smith, in spirit form. He said that he woke up in the middle of the night to a firm hand on his arm, waking him up. It was his father. But instead of looking like he normally did, he looked majestic, like a king. He was wearing a crown and holding a scepter, surrounded by light shining all around him. He allegedly told him that he had actually become the next prophet after Joseph Smith had passed away in essentially the ethereal realm. So he basically was telling him that Joseph Smith had passed down the reign to him, which meant that his reign was then passed down to Dare. So Dare said that he was now the next prophet of Earth. All he had to do was uphold the 10 Commandments as well as the teachings of Joseph Smith and bring back the practice of plural marriage. The next day, after everybody was awake, he brought his family together and he told his wife that he was called to take up a new wife. His 18-year-old housekeeper, Oni Jones, which in turn meant that they were excommunicated from the LDS Church. Now, the whole family was okay with this. The housekeeper was okay with this, and his wife Maud was okay with this. They considered this all to be blessings from God. So,
I'm trying not to puke.
I know. So, yeah, they had to flee into exile in a covered wagon and go from Salt Lake City all the way down to Chihuahua in Mexico. It's actually noted that each of the 7 sons he bore with Maud at one point in their lives also believed that they were essentially the next prophet as well, being told by hearing voices that they were, quote, the presiding patriarch in all the world. So throughout their lives, one by one, each of them would consider themselves the presiding patriarch of the world.
Oh, the whole bitch, the
yes,
whole
the
earth.
whole world. Yes, that they were next to Jesus. One by one, they would have these very fantastical delusions.
I wish Jesus would come back and just kung fu everybody. Just kung fu them.
Jesus was kung fu fighting.
Yep. I'm gonna stop. I could have gone on.
So Evril LeBaron moved his growing family and his 2 wives, Maud and Oni, to a new Mormon settlement in Chihuahua, Mexico called Colonia Juarez. There he took up odd jobs, painting, fixing things, helping building structures and gardens, and pretty much anything that he could get his hands on. He was basically the colony's handyman. There, their family would grow to be 19 children, 13 from Maud and 6 from Oni. Now, it didn't take long for Dyer to disagree with the other members. He thought he had moved his family to a colony of fellow polygamists. But by the time he had gotten there, most of the people there were following the teachings of the LDS Church and forbade plural marriages. The LeBarons were ostracized. Their children were ridiculed by their peers, many of them having severe cases of mental illnesses. One daughter, Lucinda, had bouts of hysteria and psychosis so bad that she'd kick and scream so much that they had to chain her by her ankles for hours at a time just to keep her still.
My God.
Most of the boys heard voices just like their father's monitor, which they said were God. Many of the children suffered from delusions of grandeur and auditory and visual hallucinations, each telling them that they were the true heir of Joseph Smith. One son had to be institutionalized in Arizona, and at least 3 others spent time in psychiatric hospitals. Eventually, the family was forced out of Colonia Juarez. The colony could not condone the plural marriage, nor would they adhere to the belief that Alma Dyer was the heir of Joseph Smith and the true head of the Mormon Church. And you kind of have to imagine it from his point of view. He thinks he's the number one dude on the planet, right?
Can you imagine the confidence of a mediocre man?
Yeah, and he's just the guy, he's the fix-it guy. He's the ostracized fix-it guy that nobody really wants to talk to. People are just paint this, build this, go dig that. And he thinks he is king of the world. So in 1945, Alma Dyer LeBaron took his family to the northern Sierra Madre. I always want to say Sierra Nevada because that just rolls off the tongue because I drank it a few times. Sierra Madre, and started his own colony there in the desert called Colonia LeBaron. Alma Dyer died in 1951 at the age of 65 due to lead poisoning from his years of being a painter, which I just kind of find.
I enjoy that indeed.
Right? Because he thought he was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The oldest brother, Ben, now 38, took on the role as leader and started his own church. But he was suffering from mental illness so badly that in a state of delusion, he went to Salt Lake City and began doing push-ups in a busy intersection, which landed him in jail and then subsequently in a psychiatric ward.
As it would.
Yeah, I think he got to 200
Oh.
push-ups.
Well, that's a lot of push-ups.
It is. I can't do that. So, yeah, after that, they didn't have a head of the colony. So Evril and his older brother, Joel, left the colony to join another polygamist group where they met with a larger group of people led by Rulon Allred, which is kind of a famous name in
Yes,
the Mormon...
it is. I recognized it immediately.
Yeah, I did too. It rung a bell. I didn't recognize his face though, but yeah, he had like a following of like over 1,000 people. So this was a big congregation. It was kind of a place for them to learn and kind of see what, like, set their sights of like what to strive for as far as like making their own cult. They both took leadership roles there, and eventually Joel announced that he was, in fact, the next mantle of the prophet, and he was starting his own church. This is a theme throughout the thing, which honestly shocked many of his family members because they all thought that it would be Evril that would reign. Joel was 2 years older than Evril, so he did have the age hierarchy, but they were essentially polar opposites. Evril was very good looking, very charismatic, outgoing, and was already really, really good at giving speeches. He was already like giving speeches all the time, and he had the Bible memorized front and back, and he already was known for his sermons. He seemed like a more likely candidate as a leader, whereas Joel was, I mean, he was honored for the role, but he was very timid. He was not very bright, and he was very humble. He wasn't one to really put himself in front of people. So leadership wasn't really something people expected from him. In 1955, Joel and his brothers Ross Wesley and Florin left Mexico to go back to Salt Lake City to start their own branch of Mormonism, a church called the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Life, also simply known as the Church of the Firstborn. Evril was mostly in charge of the kind of compound that they had started in Mexico, while Joel and sometimes Evril and other brothers would go back and forth to Salt Lake City. They kind of had like this, it was almost like they had 1 foot in Mexico, 1 foot in Salt Lake City, Utah. They were one of the first members of the Mormon fundamentalists to incorporate outsiders. As they traveled back and forth, they would speak to other people that they met and convince them to join the cult, even essentially stealing members from other polygamous sects and LDS members. They would convince people to give up their worldly possessions and join their godly following, like we see in most cults. By the early 1960s, the Firstborns had over 500 followers. Evril loved his role as quote-unquote patriarch. He used the money from his followers to buy fancy cars and nice clothes and would make up excuses for doing any sort of manual labor. He did not get his hands dirty, whereas his brother Joel would drive a beat-up truck and got his hands dirty and helped everybody, and he was, I don't know, he was more of a rugged man. Ervil's main interest was the wives. He was after the women. That's all he wanted. At least for now. He would tell women that God told him that he was the chosen one for them. He would steal men's wives. He married 2 sets of sisters. The ages of his wives varied from 13 to the early 20s. He claimed that Jesus' mother Mary was 14. So basically, as soon as they started their period, biblically speaking, they were ready to be married, which is revolting. I think that goes without saying.
I have no words for that.
The parents of these children were that he was not just marrying, but also simultaneously sexually assaulting. These parents not only allowed him to do this, but they were proud to give their children to this prophet. They thought this was God's will. Evril married at least 13 wives and had anywhere from 50 to 55 children. So many children that the exact number is unknown. Even the members of the family, even the siblings, do not have a full head count. Joel got so frustrated with his brother's behavior, especially when it came to making women divorce their husbands to marry him. He created a rule that the women had to wait 6 months after divorce before they could remarry. And this doesn't do anything. Like, he's still going to marry these women.
Yeah.
It just kind of makes him mad. It just kind of pisses him off. It's like an inconvenience. So the tension between the two brothers grows until the mid-60s, when Joel had enough and moved to a place called Los Molinos, which means mills, in California, where he started his own branch of firstborns, essentially leaving Evril in charge in Mexico. Now that Evril was in charge, he had kind of crossed polygamy off the to-do list. And now he's moving on to another one of Joseph Smith's teachings, blood atonement. He believed that it was the responsibility of the firstborns to fight against evil on behalf of God himself, which basically meant anyone and everyone that did not believe the way that they believed, including the LDS Church and the United States government. He convinced, he convinced his followers that they were his army for God. He'd go days on end preaching for hours and hours. He told them that the Catholic Church, that the U.S. government, that all these different people from the LDS Church would send assassins to destroy their colony and kill them all. He told them that they had to be ready at any moment to kill or be killed.
Why are cults always so fucking paranoid? I swear to God.
So intense. And I do think that it has to do with these delusions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It has to. So word got back to Joel about what was going on with Evril and Colonia LeBaron, and he came back to settle things with his brother. They both fought over their intentions for the churches. Evril believed, like Joseph Smith, that the most favored by God would also be the most wealthy. So he wanted to create a sort of retreat for like the rich and famous. Like, he wanted to build huge buildings and spas and like have like this big ass like retreat center so he could rake in the millions, so he could show off that he was favored by God. Whereas Joel was more humble and more simple, and he just wanted a farming community. And the two of them just bickered back and forth over this. Joel and a few of his other brothers ended up having a little bit of an intervention with Evril, sitting him down and talking to him about stepping down from his role as patriarch. They allegedly got a really good heart-to-heart moment. They all cried. They were consoling each other. Evril seemed to really be accepting this. He said that he had been really stressed out, and like this whole thing was like really taking a toll on him, and he felt good about stepping down. He said he was relieved about this. He felt good. Then a few weeks later, Evril came before his family and announced that he had had another vision.
Like you do.
Of course. So God had allegedly visited him and told him that he was actually the new heir to Joseph Smith's reign, and that his brother Joel had turned against him, therefore turning against God, and was now a fallen prophet. He just flipped a whole bitch on this whole thing. He said that that his brother Joel had committed treason against heaven, and therefore he had to atone for his sins. Yeah. Right? He's literally just slaughtering anybody in his way.
Yeah, that's not.
And using his profit as justification.
Okay.
He told their people that the followers of Joel's church, that the end times were near and that they were turning their backs on God. That this was a sign of the end times, and that Joel's church was turning their backs on God, and that if they wanted to gain favor for God, that they would denounce Joel's teachings and join Ervil's church instead. This is like the worst, like sibling rivalry. Like,
stupid.
It's my pair of pants. No, it's mine.
It's my turn on the Xbox.
Yeah. Like, what the fuck? The major majority of Joel's followers stayed with Joel in Los Molinos, California, which obviously angered the fuck out of Evril. And Evril set up his new sect in San Diego and began enforcing blood atonement. To him, this was a holy war against God and the forces of evil, aka his brother. Like, he thought he was basically Jesus and his brother was basically Satan, and they had to battle it off for like the battle of the end times. Like, he thought this was the war, like the main spiritual war. By this point, his followers, men, women, and teenagers, were all trained assassins. He taught them how to handle guns and heavy machinery, as well as make Molotov cocktails. He ordered a hit on his brother Joel later that year in 1972. Joel was killed with 2 shots to the chest and 1 to the head, nearly exactly the same way that Joseph Smith was killed.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Evril tried to murder his brother in 1974, or he was tried for the murder of his brother in 1974, but it was overturned because of a technicality. The hitman didn't show up to court. And in Mexican court, that was basically, it was overruled because of that. So while he was awaiting trial, Evril wrote an 86-page manifesto entitled Hour of Crisis, Day of Vengeance, which is so fucking edgy. Ouch.
Every one of these people needs to chill
It's
the
so
fuck
much,
out.
dude. It's so much. It's like who can out edgelord the edgelord? Like,
Cut themselves on all them edges.
know. It was basically an essay that he had copies made and delivered throughout colonial LeBaron. In this essay, he wrote, quote, "The sword of vengeance will hang over the heads of all those who shall fail to hear the word of the Lord." Yeah. Yeah. From there, Joel's firstborn congregation elected their brother Verlin, not Evril, and this pissed him the fuck off.
What name now?
This is Verlin.
So we got Evril.
Mm-hmm.
Verlin.
Yep.
These fundy people need help with
There's
names.
too many kids. They just like
They're just making up shit now, which is fine, but
it's like they put like alphabet dice in a Yahtzee
like
thing and just throw it.
What is it? Vernal?
Verlin.
Verlin. Oh, sorry, it's stupid. It's like you looked at that baby and went, I don't like that one. So I'm going to name it that.
That thing looks like a medieval wizard. I'm going to... Yep. So on December 26th, the day after Christmas in 1974, Evril ordered the Las Molinas compound to be raided to find and kill Verlin. But unbeknownst to him, Verlin was in a safe house in Nicaragua.
You shouldn't have to have a safe house from your own religion.
From your own brother.
Right? The fuck?
Yeah. In another country. So this group of followers ended up going to the compound. They threw Molotov cocktails and shot the place up, just littered the place with bullets, destroying everything, injuring countless people. 2 people were killed in the process, and then they just drove away while the whole thing burnt down. Now, this place did not have a phone, so it took a while for authorities and emergency personnel to get there. They had to go drive to get them. So by the time anybody showed up to help, the entire place was pretty much burnt down. And after that, he tried going around to other polygamist fundamentalist groups to gain more followers, but instead, one by one, they rejected his claims, and one by one, he grew a hit list. He grew enemies. Evril deemed anyone who didn't join him to be traitors of God Almighty, and thus they had to pay for their atonements. In 1975, he ordered the hit on Bob Simons, who owned a great deal of land that Evril wanted, but Bob refused to hand it over. Bob was another polygamist minister who, after several heated debates, had denied Evril because he claimed that he was the true mantle of Joseph Smith. And he was actually sent there to convert Native Americans. He would allegedly just start spouting off gibberish, saying that the spirit had given him the power to speak native tongue.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
I know.
Was it just like, ho tie, see my bow tie?
Probably. I don't, like, it was probably really fucking terrible and cringy and rude. But, yeah, he got a hit on him. So some of the followers went out there and coaxed him away from his land and shot him, just like the rest. In 1977, Evril ordered a hit on their old minister, Rulon Allred, who had also refused to join their movement. And that was basically an assassination. I mean, like, Rulon Allred was the leader of thousands. Like, that was a big hit.
I just don't know how these people convince other people to listen to them.
They're doing it for God.
Oh.
They're doing it for God. They're doing it for their original prophet. It's pretty incredible the amount of brainwashing, because these people were good people. Like, at heart, they were good people.
That's what I find.
They weren't killers.
Exactly, that people get involved in cults are not bad or stupid.
No.
It's just whatever message that cult had appealed to them in some fundamental way, something they were missing and lacking from their life, and it's just really sad.
Well, they take what they already believe in.
And twist it.
Yes,
yeah.
And utilize it for their own gain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. So Ervil's 13th wife, Rena, was ordered to kill Ervil's stepdaughter, Ramona. This is family on family all the way.
Yeah, I figured it
And
would
again, they're doing it for God. They're doing it for each other. They're doing it because they love each other. So they think. He continued to control members of his family and brainwash them to commit murders against themselves and other followers. His 10th wife, Vonda, who was pregnant at the time, was ordered to kill a man named Dean Grover Vest. He was a firstborn member who had left. Dean was huge. He was 6'7", 200 pounds of pure muscle. He was a Vietnam vet who had been Ervil's military leader. Like, you got to remember, Ervil had an army. He had 50 plus kids, plus all of his followers.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
He had roughly, I mean, probably less than 500 at that point, but he had hundreds of people as an army. Men, women, and children. So yeah, this man, this 6'7" man was his military leader. And he hired his pregnant wife to assassinate him. Which honestly was kind of smart, because she's a sweet little pregnant woman who is very kind.
Who's going to suspect that?
Exactly. I think he like bent over to get something or something like that, and she shot him point blank in the back of the head. She was later convicted and sentenced to life in prison. She is also suspected to have killed a woman named Noemi Zarate, who was one of his father-in-law's wives, who had been very critical of Ervil's teachings and had fled the church after the raid on Los Molinos. Apparently, not just Vonda, but also one of her sister wives helped in this murder. So this is wife on wife on wife murder, which you never see. Ervil also allegedly ordered a hit on his 17-year-old pregnant daughter, Rebecca, in 1977 because she wanted to leave the group. It's alleged that her stepbrother and brother-in-law strangled her.
My God.
Right? Ervil was arrested in June of 1979 in Mexico and extradited back to the United States, where he was convicted of the murder of Rulon Allred. He was sentenced to life in prison in 1980 at Utah State Prison. He committed suicide less than a year later in August of 1981. And you would think that the story ends there.
I'm guessing it don't.
It sure doesn't. He's one of the few men, aside from like political leaders, that were able to continue killing after they died. So while he was in prison, Evril LeBaron wrote a 400-page version of the Bible called the Book of the New Covenants, which essentially ordered members to kill those who were not obedient to his teachings, essentially a Bible hit list. 20 copies were printed and distributed amongst his closest followers. Only 2 days after his death, his brother Verlin, who he'd been trying to kill for years, died in an automobile accident in Mexico City. Very mysteriously. Family rumor has it that it's not an accident. We can assume that. What was called the 4 o'clock murders were a string of 4 separate murders in 3 different places that took place all at 4 p.m. It was like almost like a Thanos snap, like on certain particular people on the hit list. Dwayne, oh man, this is such a hard last name to say. Chenoweth, one of Erbel's followers. There's a huge family of Chenoweths that are all interconnected with the LeBarons. He was one of the followers who had left alongside his 8-year-old daughter, who happened to go to work with him that day. She wasn't on the hit list. She was not supposed to be killed. She just happened to be standing close by, and they shot her point blank anyway.
It's terrible.
They were shot just as well as Eddie Marston, one of Erbel's stepsons, and Mark Chenoweth, who was a former member, and he was killed in his office in Houston. He was a father of 6. Now, 5 of the 7 members who had been ordered to kill during the 4 o'clock murders were found guilty of murder. Cynthia LeBaron testified and was given immunity. Jacqueline LeBaron was captured by the FBI in 2010. So, like, several decades later.
Took them fucking long enough.
Yeah, she pleaded guilty to conspiracy to obstruct religious beliefs, but was released from custody a few years later. It's estimated that 25 people were killed according to Erbel's holy hit list, and it's believed that that number could be much higher than that. Of course, because of all the secrecy within the families. Now, one aspect of this case that I haven't really touched much on, which I won't really go into very much detail about because there is so much secrecy inside of these family cults, but that's the perspective of the children. Remember, there are hundreds and hundreds of children here, and with each member, adult member, having anywhere from 10 to 50 children, there were hundreds of displaced children when Erbel's reign of terror exploded and his blood atonement practice was put into place. Pretty much everyone on the colony had to go into hiding and had to disperse, especially the children. So while Erbel was in hiding, he instructed all of his members on where to go and what to do at all times. They were to take on new identities, harvest weapons, and prepare for basically the end times at all time. He set up.
Sounds so stressful.
It's so fucking stressful, and there's so many moving parts, and there's so much at stake. I mean, not only is like the actual government looking for them, but they think that so much more of the government is after them. You know what I mean? Like they have like the paranoid delusions and all of that on top of what is actually happening. This is a lot of like fast paced. This is a lot of anxiety and stress over decades. This is a lot, especially for these children to grow up in. He set up machine repair businesses in various states around the United States to generate income while he was on the run and in hiding, staying at various hotels, safe house, like basements, and various members would have like vacation homes that he could stay in. He was basically hopping around from place to place, zigzagging all over the United States. And the followers and many of the children would work in these repair businesses, these machine repair businesses. And I mean, the children were as young as like 12 working on these like washing machines and shit like that. So for the safety of the children, they were all sent to different hiding places across the United States, oftentimes changing at random. Safe houses were assigned by Erbel, and the children were ordered to leave their beds in the middle of the night, grabbing whatever they could carry, and then jumping in a car and being driven hundreds and hundreds of miles away in the middle of the night. They don't know where they're going, and this could happen at the drop of a hat, all at Erbel's command. They stayed in Ogden, Utah, parts of Arizona, all throughout the lower states. They were kept out of sight, in hiding, and told to always say, "I don't know," if authorities asked them anything. They were told that the police and anyone outside the home, anybody from the outside world, that they were of the devil, and that basically they were evil and they should not be trusted. Many of the people on the hit list were also caregivers for these children. So it was really painful for them to experience like life through not just knowing the people that were being killed, but knowing the people that were doing the killing as well. Like these were all people that they loved and that they grew up loving them. These were their mothers, their sisters, their teachers, their friends, their neighbors. These were kind and loving people that they had known their whole lives, people that they trusted, good people doing what they believed was right, something that they believed they were doing for their loved ones' souls, to get their souls to heaven. Like they really thought that they were doing good. And it was all because some power-hungry man brainwashed them all to do it, passing it off as prophets' teachings. They were taught that killing and being killed were all part of God's plan, and it was an honor to serve God in that way. They simply just did not understand, and it would take them years to be able to acclimate to the rest of the world, to grow up and grow out of this cult. There's actually a really wonderful documentary called Daughters of the Cult, where now grown children who were able to leave the cult actually are able to sit down with their sisters after growing apart and, you know, kind of becoming worldly and, you know, getting their sanity back. I just
saw that documentary.
Really?
Yeah.
I've seen bits and pieces of it because I don't have Hulu, but I did listen to a few interviews from the sisters and the daughters, and it's just terrifying and it's heartbreaking.
It's just ridiculous.
You know, like the father and daughter that were killed. Like one of the daughters who spoke on the interviews, like that was her caregiver. That's whose house she was staying at. She was supposed to be at that repair center. She could have been killed that day.
Yeah, she could have.
You know? Like,
it's wild.
It's fucking terrifying. So on top of all of that, you know, we don't know if the hit list was ever finished. We don't know if there was more than 20. We don't know if there was more. We don't know if they're still abiding by blood atonement, because these colonies are still active today. Now,
yes, they are.
Yeah. And like I said, they're situated in Chihuahua, Mexico, which is a major part of the cartel is there as well, surrounding the colonies. And so now, to this day, they have like military status in these colonies.
Yeah.
And it deals heavily with the gun trade, which also subsequently deals heavily with the drug trade, because the United States has the guns, Mexico has the drugs. Mexico banned all guns. Like, you can't get firearms unless you're part of a firearm club, and it's really hard to get into these clubs. So essentially, they just make deals with the United States. We get their drugs, you know, and it's just a very strange and very violent and gritty and real and raw experience of new age outlaw essentially happening currently right now. You know what I mean? Like, the colonies have these big watchtowers with armed guards, and, you know, the cartels have like their drivers that watch their watchers, and then like the colonies have like their own armed forces that patrol the streets every day. Like, they have like full on military, both sides, while also fighting the U.S. and Mexican governments as well. It doesn't
seem like Mormonism and the cartels would ever cross paths.
You would never think.
Yeah, but
you would never think. But when you outlaw something, when you ban something, when you make something criminal, then you make criminals. And when you make criminals, like, they tend to work together sometimes.
I absolutely believe polygamy should be banned, but not polyamory. I think polygamy is fine if it's not just completely all men running women. You know what I mean?
Right. I think a lot of the banning of polygamy has more to do with taxes.
Yes,
than it does women's rights.
But I also, because the fucking government, our U.S. government doesn't give a fuck about women's rights. But for me, it's the child brides and the grooming
absolutely.
and the... Ugh.
Yeah. You don't see any female polygamists with like 18 husbands.
I could do it.
I
volunteer.
I ship it, but like you just don't see that, and it's because
of
the way that it's
for
used.
every task.
Yes. Don't touch me, but go do that. Go do that
Yeah,
thing
I mean,
over
I
there.
might give you a blowy if you do a good job.
Put some gloves on with some baby oil and look away.
Take one titty out. That's all you get. I'm sorry. Am I? No.
When I looked into this case originally, I was like, Mormon Manson, gotcha. Hit list, gotcha. Okay, I can understand this.
It's still wild.
But when I found out that all these other parts are interconnected, that, like, and I mean, some of these, most of these murders weren't even, like, nobody was convicted for them or anything like that. There's a lot of cover up going on.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of secrecy. There's a lot of paying off hush money. There's a lot of bribes. There's a lot of blackmail. Like, there's so much juiciness, like, really terrible juiciness to this story, and I just find it strange that it's just not talked about very much.
Yeah, I hadn't really heard of it till we started doing this podcast.
Right, like Marilyn Manson.
He's also a shitbag, by the way.
Terrible person.
Yeah.
Charles Manson.
Also shitbag.
I don't want to say only, but they killed like 3.
It was 4.
4.
Possibly 5, but 4 confirmed.
Right, but he's so
Hold on. I have to count now. 2. Yeah, 4.
Okay,
I could
be
wrong.
But you know what I mean, though. Like, he's so much in the spotlight. He's such like a figure that, like, he's like a caricature now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why did they focus so much on that case when
And not this one?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think because there was actual religion involved, and we seem to kind of want to back off of that. You know what I mean?
Well, and there's so much political. Here's the thing that I got from some of the documentaries that I watched on this case, is that the FBI. I feel like I'm getting listened to now that I said that. Now
They're like, yes.
Yeah, me. The FBI prefers to hire Mormons because of their upholding their doctrine, of their
they ain't
secrecy.
on drugs and they ain't drinking
They're
either.
not on drugs. They're not drinking. They're not gambling.
They're not fucking for the most part.
They're fucking one at a time, once a month kind of thing. But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they already are conditioned to secrecy.
That's true. I think that you make a good point.
I'm not saying all FBI agents are Mormon, but I do know that they
recruit
prefer,
heavily from there.
and they really do like to recruit Mormons as part of it. So who knows? Maybe there's lots of reasons
internal
why,
cover up. You know,
why they just don't talk about this case. Because there really isn't a lot of information on particular members.
Oh, I'm sure
There's
not.
hardly any information on the children because there was so many, but still, there's so much secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder what more is in there, but yeah, this was juicy research.
You know what I wonder about?
What do you wonder about?
Business time.
What is that?
That's where I do business. This is short and sweet
Tell me
because
more.
I've got to pee.
Oh my God.
I'm human. I pee. Well,
Jesus.
I'm not going to pee on you. That would, be gross. I'm going to put it where
Yeah,
it
I'd
belongs.
never ask you to do that.
Nah, it's not my kink.
No.
Pee goes in toilet.
Yeah.
That's where
we
it
don't
go.
kink shame, but not in this house.
I can kink ask why, but I don't want
Kink
the
ask
answer.
why?
Yeah. But why? Anyway, join our Patreon. It's really rad in there. In addition, you can find case photos. Those are public because we didn't take those pictures. So it'd be weird if you made you pay for them. That would be bizarre. You can find all kinds of things over there. I suggest that you go. Hey, you want to suggest me cases? You can do that for free too on our Discord.
Please
Hop
go
in
into
there
Discord.
and say hello.
Come meet us. Come say
I'm in there every
hi.
day, bitches.
I am not. But
Nope.
if you come in there and you at Willow,
She might come in there, maybe.
gotta coax me in there.
But you can always find me in there.
I just have
chatting
my
it up.
notifications turned off. I'm on D&D mode 24/7, so I'm sorry.
She's just better than all of us.
no.
Anyway,
I'm just
moving
disassociating. I'm not
Uh,
here right now. Please leave a
on.
message.
Do you want more polygamy? Then you should check out Maris's podcast, Reality, in which we spill the tea on reality television. And right now we're covering season 18 of Sister Wives.
Hell yeah.
Or I should say Sister Wife, because that turned into Wife Thunderdome. And like 4 wives enter, 1 wife leaves.
Wow.
They're all gone,
Yeah.
except for one.
Did they fight?
Oh, they fought, but not physically,
Oh.
except the square-headed one with the weird eyebrows.
I don't know anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, I'd rather listen to Maris tell me about it than actually watching it myself.
A lot of people who listen to Maris's podcast are that way. They don't want to watch the show, but they want to hear him talk about
Yeah,
it
I'd much rather
passionately.
that. Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
much rather that. Yeah.
But anyway, if all you can do to support this podcast is listen, thank you. I love you.
Thank you.
Also, if you're listening on YouTube, and you better be, I don't know why I'm
We're
threatening.
just now getting on YouTube.
Yeah. Then please gently caress and fondle the like button.
Ew.
Goose the subscribe
Consensually.
button and hit
Oh
that
my
notification
Lord, have
bell.
mercy, you're doing it.
I am doing it because, listen, if you don't tell people to, they won't.
I don't do it if somebody tells me to do it.
I do it
refuse.
sometimes because I'm like, oh, I do like this content.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a contrary cunt and not do it just because I told you to, I don't know what to tell you.
If you are, then don't. Don't hit the like button.
Yeah, don't. You suck.
Cutie, you. Cutie. So adorable, not clicking the like button. Anyways, we
If
should
you
go.
click that like button, I will come to your house and I will frown
She
at
will
you.
not make any sort of move towards
No
you.
effort made.
Nope.
No, I'm tired. A bitch is so fucking exhausted. I just got diagnosed with PMDD. And let me tell you, it's premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It means your period's evil.
Yeah.
like, more
and your
evil?
body tries to kill you every month.
And then it makes you crazy.
Yeah.
Like, woohoo, no sleep.
She's
You're
not
sweaty.
having fun.
I'm not having a fun time. Like, bad thoughts. It's not good. So pray
So
for
come
me. or
come into
something.
Discord, hit us up with all the memes that you have. Memes are medicine for the people that don't have health care. So
And we don't.
yeah.
Yeah, shit was
So-
expensive to find that out, and then I can't even do anything about it. So come on down.
Come on down.
Hooray!
Meme and
look, I want
disassociate.
to try an experiment. To all you listening, I want you to think happy, warm thoughts so that this
Yeah.
shit does not sit on us and burst my pipes.
She's talking about the
cold weather.
cold storm that's coming
Yeah.
through this weekend.
So we're going to positively manifest that to not happen.
We live on top of a mountain in the
we
middle
will
of
not
fucking
escape
nowhere.
for a week.
Yeah. The roads get really, really bad if it gets below freezing at any time.
And I don't have central heat, so my pipes are just like, I will explode and cost you $1,000.
Yeah.
So we don't want that.
Yeah. I'm still recovering from damage 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. My my
3
small
years ago.
bathroom is just
3 years ago.
fucked. It's just fucked because of that. Anyway, hey, I love you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Us on your social media platform of choice. Linktree/cruelty has all of the links. Check out our Patreon for exclusive episodes, merch, ad-free episodes, live ghost hunts, and much more. Please be sure to subscribe. New episodes are uploaded weekly. Thank you so much. See you next time. Music and production by Libby.